speech is 9/11. 9/11, Ruth Halvorson.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters. This is more of a book review. It was a book that my husband left on the shelf, and in downsizing, I found it. 102 Minutes, the untold story of the fight to survive inside the Twin Towers by Jim Dwyer and Kevin Flynn. At 8:46 a.m. on September 11th, 2001, 14,000 people were inside the Twin Towers, reading emails, making trades, eating croissants at windows on the world. Then over the next 102 minutes, each would become part of a drama for the ages. One was witnessed only by the people who lived it until now. Of the millions of words written about this wrenching day, most have been from the outside looking in. New York Times reporters Jim Dwyer and Kevin Flynn have taken the opposite approach. They have reported solely from the perspective of the people inside the towers. It's an account of ordinary men and women who saved themselves and others. Among them were the construction manager and his colleagues who pried open doors and freed dozens of people trapped high in the North Tower. There was a police officer who was a few blocks away filing his retirement papers, but he grabbed his badge and sprinted to the buildings. The window washer, stuck in an elevator 50 floors up with 5 other men, used a squeegee to escape. The secretaries, who led an elderly man down 89 flights, and the young executives who carried a disabled woman from the 68th floor. Then there was the fire chief and a marathon who was the first rescuer to reach the injured and the trapped on the 78th floor of the South Tower after a grueling dash up the stairs wearing 50 pounds of gear. Chance encounters, moments of grace, a shout across an office shaped these minutes, marking the border between fear and solace, staking the boundary between life and death. At 8:30 a.m., the North Tower, first into the office on the 89th floor of One World Trade Center, as always, Diane DeFontes shut the door behind her, then locked it with a bolt that slid up and down into the floor and ceiling. The lawyers were unlikely to arrive at the office of Brinker, Biddle, and Reith for another 30 minutes. Until then, DeFontes, the 51-year-old receptionist, would serve as the early voice of a humming, busy law firm engaged in global trade litigation. Atop the world, or near enough, more than 1,000 feet above New York Harbor, she settled into a solitary bubble. She sipped coffee, spooned yogurt, answered the phone. "He's not at his desk right now. May I have him call you?" she said, and she swapped the easy on the street running shoes that she wore to commute for the easy on the eyes dress shoes stashed in a desk drawer. That desk drawer was found at Ground Zero afterwards. Then at 8:40 a.m., 10 minutes later, a bomb, thought Diane, when thinking became possible again. And then at 8:46:30, an impact that had knocked her really off of her chair happened there on the 89th floor. The door swung free even though she had bolted it shut. And then in another part of the floor, Walter Pilchek had just pushed open the doors to the office of Cosmo International, a brokerage where he was president. Then Akane Ito heard him coming and looked up from her desk to greet him. Before Pilchek could get the words "good morning" out of his mouth, he felt something smack the back of his head and he was hurled into a wall. Then ceiling tiles collapsed on them. A bomb, they decided, several breaths later. At 9:01, there in the North Tower, the fuel on Flight 11, some 10,000 gallons, had ignited into giant fireballs, the biggest with a girth of 200 feet, wider than the building itself. The jet fuel probably was spent within a few minutes, and much of it outside the building, but also traveling through the tower via the elevator shafts. The calamity was only beginning to ripen. There on the 89th floor, the doors were jammed or unreachable that they wanted to use to get to the stairs. The occupants of that floor could not climb over rubble and get out the way their counterparts as they had done on floor 88. And so they were stuck there, unable to leave their room. The men and women of the 89th floor had taken the small protective steps as they stayed there of sensible people in smoke. They had moistened clothing to use as a filter and called for help. They'd stuck jackets into the crevices at the bottom of the office doors. And they were breathing through damp paper towels as men and women banged on the metal stairway door, but it was an act of futility. A man from MetLife stood in the hallway wondering if the world was unraveling, and suddenly a muffled voice called out, "Get away from the door." Then a moment later, the claw tooth of a crowbar burst through the drywall, tearing open the frame. And there Pablo Ortiz pushed the door open, and behind him in the stairs were other people, and they were asked to move quickly to the stairs. And so they started their descent down those 88 some floors to the bottom. So Diane, who started the day up top, did make it to the street. It was quite an episode, of course, for not only them, but us too. This is just a part of the many stories in this amazing and interesting and sad book. Those matters.